Today, I wanted to talk about the status of the war from a supply point of view, specifically the weapon systems that are being used and how much of this is sustainable for both sides. Now, the Ukrainians are definitely punching above their weight. They have only lost about 160 tanks compared to Russia's 660. So, from a video game point of view, that's spectacular. Unfortunately, that's not the end of the story because the Ukrainians have a limited supply here. If you include all 300 odd tank systems that have been brought in from Central European countries in NATO who want to help the Ukrainians only have about 2,300 tanks. But the Russians have 13,000. I mean, the balance of forces here is not even close. There's some legitimate questions to be asked about how usable those Russian tanks are because 10,000 of them are in storage. But the fact remains that for the Ukrainians, this is an all-in effort. Their entire male population has been mobilized, weapons are coming in from the West, everything they had in a stockpile is going. The Russians are not putting their weight into this yet. And when and if that changes, we're in a very different conflict situation. Now, in order to help the Ukrainians with their numerical inferiority, the United States is providing a number of weapon systems to the Ukrainians. We've talked about the howitzers before, but today I want to talk about two of the systems that have allowed the Ukrainians to take out so many Russian weapon systems. First, we have the javelins. Now, javelins are something that the Ukrainians absolutely love. They're man-portable. They take out any sort of armored vehicle, tanks included. And the issue is that we have already given the Ukrainians 1/4 of our total stockpile. And Lockheed, who is the manufacturer of the Javelin, estimates that at current rates of production, just replacing that stockpile would take 2 years. So in order to keep up with the pace that the Ukrainians are using these weapons, we're talking about needing to build out our manufacturing for the Javelin supply line by at least a factor of 15. That is unlikely, and we haven't started on that yet because that would require congressional approval. The second system that has proven very popular is the Stinger, first popularized by Rambo III and, of course, the Afghan Mujahideen against the Soviet occupation in the 1980s. Well, we've already given the Ukrainians 1/3 of our total stockpile of Stingers, and even worse than the Javelins, Raytheon, the manufacturer, hasn't received a government order for the Stinger in over a decade. In fact, most of the components that go into the Stinger aren't even manufactured anymore. So if we want to keep up with this weapon system, we're talking about having to build out multiple supply lines from scratch in order to incorporate more advanced semiconductors into the systems that are used. That's not going to happen in less than a year. Now, there's two problems here. The first, of course, is for the war as it's being carried out right now, where over the midterm, the Russians are going to experience a greater and greater force advantage. Over the longer term, the Ukraine war is exactly the type of conflict that I predicted in a lot of my work, specifically in The Absent Superpower, where the United States plays favorites in wars and provides equipment and intelligence, but doesn't really get involved itself. Well, if you're backing the weaker power, man-portable weapons like the Javelin and the Stinger are absolutely essential. And at the rate we're going through our stockpile, we're going to run dry this calendar year. So if we do want to use tools like that in order to mess around in other people's wars, in order to tilt them to our favor without actually putting boots on the ground, we need a significant build out as soon as possible. Now, in the short term, this calendar year, the Ukrainians are probably going to cease getting this sort of support from the United States in about 5 or 6 months, because that's when the cupboard will literally be dry. At that point, the balance of force in the war changes drastically. So we really have until next winter to come up with a backup plan, or by then, something's got to give. Ukraine, Russia, supplies, the nature of the war, we'll see. But this phase that we're in, where there's incremental gains going one way or the other day on day, this is not sustainable without a robust weapons transfer system to Ukraine, and that is now unlimited time. All right, that's it for me. If you find this video or any of our other work useful, just keep in mind this is free. It is always free. Feel free to share it with whoever you like. You can subscribe easily at the website. And if you do find it useful, by all means, please do proceed to give a donation to the AFYA Foundation. That's afyafoundation.org. They're in the process of providing medical assistance to the entire Ukrainian refugee community. That number has actually shrunk a little bit to about 6 million because after the siege of Kiev was broken, a number of Ukrainians relocated from Europe back home. But there are still very high casualty rates going on in the front, and the Ukrainians can use all the help they can get. There are links as to how you can help below this video. Thank you very much, and until next time.